welcome to Mr. Otter's studio. Today I'm going to show you how to draw a duckling and paint it using watercolors. This will be a step-by-step tutorial, and maybe you'll learn some new watercolor techniques as you follow along and some drawing techniques. This was a requested tutorial. 8 months ago, Yakisha requested this, and 1 month ago, Ria requested this. So sorry, it takes me sometimes years to get back to your requests, but when someone else requests it, then usually it might get bumped up the list. So actually, I did have a pet duck named Tom. Here's a picture of him. So I do like ducks. Here's Tom when he was a duckling. So anyway, that's a little history. Let's get to the project. Here are the supplies that you need. You need watercolor paper. Make sure you're using the right side. The rough side is usually the front. Watercolor paints. I'm just using an 8-color set. A watercolor brush. This is a number 10 round. You could use a number 8, that would work as well. But of course, use what you have. A pencil and an eraser. Water in a container, paper towel, and a scratch piece of paper to test your watercolors on. Let's get started. The first thing we're going to do is draw the duckling. And I'm going to break this into some simple shapes. I'm going to be drawing dark so that you can see, but make sure you're drawing this part really lightly. So lightly you don't need to erase any of your lines. All right, so we're going to start with the duckling's head, and we're going to draw a circle showing where it is, and it's almost right in the middle of the upper part of your paper. So you have to make sure you can fit its whole body and legs underneath. So we're just going to draw a circle. Then under this circle, we're going to draw a bigger circle that is a little bit wider, almost like a circle that has been smashed. And then we'll put the legs in a minute, but the legs will come down to about this line right here. So I like to just divide the head in half. And the beak actually starts a little bit below that line. This duck's like looking down. So to make the bill, we're just going to draw a triangle out to the side and bring it back in. So when we bring it back in, it's almost going to be flat, almost. Now, ducks do not have a pointed bill, so we're going to just adjust it a little bit and make the end round. So just round it off and then bring that part back in. And then there is going to be just a little bit underneath. And at the top, you're going to just make a little curve, like a C, and it shouldn't go past this point. And then it's going to curve back in and come back like this, almost like you're making a backwards C here, and then bringing it back down, like a chubby cheek. The eye is a little bit above this line, and it's going to start almost lining up with this corner of the mouth. So about right here. Let's just draw a circle first, and then we will make it more into the shape of the actual eye. You have a circle, and then you're just going to curve it down into a point. Just draw a triangle off this lower side. And then there's a little triangle up here in this corner. So this looks a little bit like a duck and not a duckling, and I'm going to show you why. This bill is too big. So I'm going to make it just a little bit smaller and show you what that looks like. Okay, so let's just make that a little bit shorter so it looks just like a younger duck. Go ahead and erase those lines that we used to draw the head and those lines that we used to make the placement of the eye. And we are going to use a little bit of the circle right here, but let's erase part of the neck, but it goes up a little bit straight. It's almost straight up and down right in front of the eye, and then it starts to curve around the head and then comes back in towards the body. And there is a neck, so you might just need to put a little bit of a neck in this front side. All right, now we're just going to draw these little tiny wings, and it's just like a little leaf shape or almost like a thorn actually, that's coming off the sides. And if you want to just draw a line through the middle of the body of the duckling, that's where it starts, and then it just comes back up. They're just these tiny little wings. He's just starting out. And then we're going to bring his body just to a little bit of a point right here. All right, let's draw these little duck legs. And we're going to start with this one on the left. You can draw them close together, but really they're pretty far apart on this duckling. Just draw a triangle on this side that comes into a little bit of a circle at the bottom. Then at the bottom of the circle, we're going to draw a line coming straight across horizontally. So it stops about halfway. This foot curves a little bit forward, and then I'm just going to draw a line coming out from this one that goes over, not as far over as this one. So this one ends here. This one's going to end a little bit further back, and then you just connect those pieces. And I'll erase some of these lines inside so you can see what that looks like. And you can indicate that this is the top of this part of the foot, the toe, and then you can draw some triangles in here just so you can see kind of the thickness, I guess, of these different parts. Let's draw the next leg. So we're going to do the same thing, draw a triangle. This one's going to be up a little bit higher than this one. So as soon as we get to about where this one started to curve over, we're going to draw a line coming back. It passes a little bit past the top of this one, and then this part of this foot curves out and over. And then the middle part of this, what are these called? Why can't I think of what they're called? What do ducks have? Fins? Duck feet. And now you just want to connect the pieces like we did with the one before, and then you can draw those triangles in. And I'm gonna make this a little bit skinnier at the top. Because this one's in front of that one, it almost makes this duck look like it's walking towards us. Now is the time to look at your duck and make any adjustments that you want to make. I would erase any of these lines that you used to draw it with. Hopefully yours is not as dark as mine. You're finished drawing. Now let's set up our watercolors. If you are left-handed, you're going to set all of your supplies up on the left side. So I'm right-handed, so I'm going to set them up on the right side. You need your watercolors, water, test piece of paper, and your paper towel. There are not a lot of colors. We're going to be using black, yellow, and orange, and that's it. All right, this is the exciting part. We're ready to paint. I'm gonna show you one way to do this, but if you know a better way, go for it. So let's mix up a big puddle of yellow in our tray. Drop some color into the tray with your paintbrush and add some yellow to it. This is where your test paper comes in handy. That'll be perfect. The first thing we're going to do is make a puddle of yellow and then paint the whole duck in with our yellow paint. All of the areas except for the beak and the legs and the eye. And I have a huge puddle because I want this to be wet because I'm actually going to be adding some things around the edges and I kind of want it to mix in with this yellow. If you're painting for the first time, one thing to remember is not to scrub your paper. Don't go back and forth over some areas. Now what I'm going to do is get more yellow on my brush, blot it off a little bit on my paper towel, and fan out the edges by squishing it. Make sure you have enough paint, or when you go to add this texture, it's just going to soak it up. So the paint underneath is dry. I'm dipping my brush right into the tray, fanning it out, and then coming along these edges just to create a little bit of texture, almost like I'm painting grass. And I like to do this while the other paint's still wet so that it starts to blend in with it a little bit. So just go ahead, and if you want that texture, you can do that around the edges. And it definitely starts to go in the direction of the wings on these sides. So if you're making that fur along these edges, make sure you're going towards the bottom. So fan your brush out and just add a little texture around those edges. All right, now I'm gonna dip in the yellow. I'm dipping right in the yellow and then in my puddle a little bit, blotting off on my paper towel. And then I'm going to come in some of these darker areas and just put some solid yellow in while it's still wet. Underneath, I want it to be a little bit more yellow. Where this wing is, if it already has started to dry, that's okay. It'll just have a different look. Like I have a big pool of water right here that I don't want to touch, but I definitely want it to get darker right around the nose. Also, you can fan your brush out and add some texture in here. This part is up to you how much texture you want to add, how bright you want this to be. You can also add a little bit of orange to your puddle. I'm just gonna add a little bit more yellow to it. All right, now I'm gonna take this even darker color and come in some of these areas where my shadows just still could use a little bit of darkening up. Definitely a little bit darker right in here. All right, after you darken those areas up a little bit, let's work on the legs. And on the legs, we're gonna mix up a light orange in our tray. Add some water to your tray, grab some orange. And also, if you don't want your colors as bright as these are pretty bright. You can add a little bit of black to your puddle, or you can add a little bit of purple. Make sure if you're painting for the first time, if this paint is wet right here, it will bleed out onto the beak. So just make sure you're not painting next to a wet area also down here. Let's start with the legs. I'm going to start with the legs because the paint down here is a little bit drier than the paint above. But if your paint is dry, then you can paint either section first. And if it does bleed down onto the legs, it's okay. So I've just taken my light orange and painted in the legs. Sorry, I didn't realize you couldn't see it. And now take that light orange and paint in the beak, making sure you're not letting that other yellow run onto it. If it's wet, just be a little careful going by those edges. And now we can add some shadows onto these legs. So I can just grab straight orange if I want. I could add a little black. First, I'm just gonna start with solid orange, and I'm just gonna add it up on the top of these legs. Rinse my brush off, blot it on my paper towel. And then I'm going to come next to those lines and just smooth that shadow out a little bit. So all you do is just paint a little bit of the darker color where you want it to be, rinse your brush off, blot it on your paper towel, and then just paint next to it. And that'll smooth that line out just a little bit. We can also put some shading in these feet, indicating, that part of this is raised up and part of it is a little bit lower. And again, to smooth it out, I'm just gonna rinse my brush off, blot it off, and then just come into these areas and just make these transitions a little bit smoother by painting next to them. And this is actually pretty dark along this side. So grab some of your orange and let's work on this one. On this one, there's a little bit of shading in the middle of this triangle and in the middle of this triangle. smooth out those lines on both sides. Now let's add some shading to the beak, or the bill, sorry. So I just painted a little triangle on top, and then I'm just going along the edges with my paintbrush just to smooth it out a little bit. Instead of just grabbing straight black, I'm actually going to paint it more of a gray, making sure I keep two little highlights in it. So we're going to make two dots, one bigger, one smaller, and then fill it in with black around it so that we get this nice little highlight. And you can make the black as dark as you want. Just make sure you know that if you make it really dark, it's going to stand out a lot because it will be the darkest thing on there. So I'm just going to start with a gray. So now what I'm going to do is mix my orange with a little bit of black, and what I'm going to do is come on the nose and just indicate that there is a little nostril. You don't have to put this in, but there is a little nostril right up in this area. I have a little black up here. I'm just going to mix a little bit of water with it. Should not be dark. It's just going to be a shadow. Just grab a little bit of it, and we're just going to create a little shadow under our duck. We're just trying to make it look like there's a little puddle that this duck is standing in. Now you can come in and you can darken some areas up. You can add some details. But what I'm going to do is just use a little bit of orange and a little bit of black, maybe some yellow and black, to darken up some of these areas up under the chin. This is the fun part where you can just add a few more details, darken it up in a few more areas. I'm going to add a little black to my yellow. You can fan your brush if your shadows look a little bit abrupt. So this is my darkest shadow that I see on the duck, right under the chin. And then there's a little bit of some dark shadows underneath right here. And I have my brush fanned so that I can get some of this texture in when I'm adding some of these shadows. And you can add as much texture to this duck as you would like. Since I added some in here, I'm just gonna have to finish it. Just a few brushes. I'm just gonna add a little bit of texture face right in here. So add as much texture as you'd like. You can add darker shadows in the legs, just adding a little bit more orange and black around those areas. So this is called glazing and layering. So I'm rinsing my brush off, making sure I dry it off, and then I'm coming along that edge and just soaking that paint up. Then come in the eye with a darker black and refine these edges a little bit more. And you are finished. You can add more details. You could add more shading around the eye if it seems to be kind of popping off the paper. To me, it is just a little bit, but it's kind of up to you. Also, I'm just gonna add a little bit of a darker line in the beak, showing that there is this bottom bill. If my pencil would have been a little bit lighter, you wouldn't see it. You would see this texture a little bit more. You can add more texture to it. You do not have to add the shadow under it, but that's basically it. Also, if you want to use a fine point pen to outline it, I'll show you what that looks like. This is going to give it a little bit more of like an illustrative effect. You can add as much detail with that pen as you want. You can add some of the detail on these legs. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Thank you so much for requesting it. I really like drawing it and painting it. I hope you are enjoying springtime. Mr. Otter Studio is on Instagram, so post your images using hashtag Mr. Otter Studio or hashtag Mr. Otter Art Studio. I hope you're enjoying spring where you live and you get a chance to go out and see all of the baby animals that are being born. Have a wonderful day. We will see you around on YouTube.